Pardon me. Madam Speaker, the question came up last night in national media about, do I have any proof of this, because ACORN denies it. And, Madam Speaker, I have in my hand the documents that do determine. These are documents that come from the U.S. Census Bureau, and they read that, let's see, they were looking for some entities that could help with the census. Their goal was to work with national organizations and corporations that could help us reach the hard-to-count population. Excuse me. And as I look down through this information that includes an agreement with ACORN, it says our overall goal was to work with organizations that could reach the hard-to-count populations. And here's what they did to identify who to partner with. They went to the list of national organizations. They added advisory committees. They used a cluster segmentation approach. They looked at the economically disadvantaged, the unattached mobile singles. That's a term I had not seen before. And high-density areas with ethnic enclaves. Okay, these are legitimate places where we'd have difficulty with the census, and I recognize and agree with that. But then they had criteria for not partnering with a group. One is if they didn't meet the criteria above that I mentioned. The second one is if they're hate groups. Now, I'd like to see that list of hate groups that's filed under the United States Census Bureau. It seems as though the Department of Homeland Security had identified conservatives as hate groups. It seems as though the FBI had the resources to send investigators out to mill through the crowds on tax freedom, or on Teabag Day, the April 15th tax day. The FBI was looking at the people that came to the courthouse square to voice their objection to the oppressive taxes that have been imposed upon this country and the irresponsible spending, and they're identified as hate groups. Conservative groups, hate groups. I don't know of a liberal group that would be on that, but I hope that we're able to make that request and get a list into the congressional record of who are the hate groups. I suspect I'm probably alleged to be on some of them. Then other groups that were not considered were law enforcement groups, anti-immigrant groups. I don't know what an anti-immigrant group is. I know there are some anti-illegal immigrant groups. I don't know of a single anti-immigrant group, but that gives you a sense of the biased ideology that lays this out. Also, any groups that might make people fearful of participating in the census, I don't know who that might be, but it gives them a way out. Or maybe any groups that did not serve the hard-to-count population. So it looks to me like they have written some regs here that will qualify ACORN. I have in my hand a document from the U.S. Census Bureau, National Partnership. And it is the document that says the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, ACORN, their task, checkmarked and dated January 13th, 2009, 3:02 p.m. Dear Sir or Madam, I'm writing to inform you that on behalf of the 2010 Census Partnership Program, we would like to invite you to become a national partner with the Census Bureau for the 2010 census. ACORN is already in. It's not a matter of conjecture. ACORN is involved in the census, and if we don't suspend that here in this Congress, the result will be, I fear, a corruption of the census process that is nearly as serious as the corruption of the election process. Why would you go to the people that have exactly the wrong track record and put them in control? Why did the President ask to move the census within the White House and out of the Department of Commerce? Why is Rahm Emanuel involved in directing this? The man from Chicago. The Chicago politics visits and arrives at the White House with the President. And by the way, if one goes back also and even begins to think that President Obama wasn't involved with ACORN and this is just a random hiring process that took place because it made sense, I would point out also that President Obama chaired for a time and sat on the board for a longer time of the Woods Foundation in Chicago, which distributed funds to community organizing groups and directed funds to ACORN. As chairing the Woods Foundation, he sent money to ACORN. He also sat on the board of the Chicago Annenberg Challenge. This is a liberal education initiative the brainchild of the unrepentant terrorist William Ayers. William Ayers recruited President Obama, at that time State Senator Obama, to sit on the board of the Chicago-Annenberg Challenge, which, what did they do? Raise money and distributed it to places including ACORN. So I think I've given you enough threads, Madam Speaker, to understand that President Obama is tied in with ACORN part and parcel, has been an employee, he's been their attorney, he's been the employee under the Project Vote. He's hired them and written them a check out of his campaign for over $800,000. Sat on the board of the Woods Foundation, the Chicago-Annenberg Challenge. Both of them sent money to ACORN. William Ayers, the unrepentant terrorist, it was founder of the Chicago-Annenberg Challenge. And by these documents here, Madam Speaker, this ACORN is working on the census and at a minimum providing temporary employees to work on the census to count the people. And we know what's happened to our election process. It's been corrupted. And by the way, there are news reports of fraudulent votes and prosecutions on fraudulent votes and people that voted multiple times that were enabled by the registrations of ACORN. Some of that, Madam Speaker, is in the news today. So I revere this election process, and I would rather lose elections than I would lose the integrity of the election process. And I'm happy enough to accept the results of a legitimate census no matter what it is. If it draws a district out of Iowa, I'll lament that. I want to have the most representation possible from Iowa. But we've got to have a real count, and we've got to deal with integrity. And when we have corrupt organizations that have all the trappings of a criminal enterprise, this Congress should shut off funding to that criminal enterprise. But instead, we don't get a vote and we don't get a debate because the rules are unprecedentedly changed and corrupted up there on the third floor in the Rules Committee where nobody goes, and if many did, they couldn't get in. We need cameras there, we need the press there, and we need open rules here on the floor, and we need people that are willing to engage in this debate and take come whatever may. If you believe in yourself, stand up and say so. I'll be happy to yield to you. But I see it never happens. You sit on your hands and you accept that this power that you happen to have right now, but the American people are going to take it back, and they're going to give it to the people that they trust. With that, Madam Speaker, I would yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time.
I yield back.